Never underestimate quiet people. They're often the ones everyone overlooks, the ones who sit at the edge of the room, listening while others fill the air with noise. The world moves fast, rewarding loudness, confidence, and showmanship. Those who talk the most get attention. Those who stay silent get mistaken for weak, shy, or dull. But quiet people see more than they say. Their silence isn't emptiness, it's awareness. They notice the tone of a conversation, the small expressions people miss, the gap between what's said and what's meant. While others are speaking, they're absorbing, connecting dots, understanding things at a level few realize. Quiet people are often judged by the surface. They're the ones coworkers pass over in meetings, classmates forget to ask for opinions, neighbors barely notice. Yet in that stillness, they're building something. They're thinking, planning, understanding the room. They're sharpening their insight in silence. When they finally speak, it's not to fill space. It's because they've found something worth saying. Their words hit harder because they've been distilled through patience. History remembers plenty of quiet figures who shaped the world not through noise, but through depth. The scientist who worked alone in his lab, the writer who spent years in solitude before publishing a masterpiece, the strategist who didn't shout orders but studied the battlefield until he saw what no one else could. Their calm didn't mean weakness, it meant focus. They didn't need validation from applause, they drew power from clarity. In social settings, quiet people are often underestimated because society equates volume with leadership. We assume the one who talks most knows the most. But leadership isn't about volume. It's about vision and restraint. The loud ones may grab the spotlight, but the quiet ones often hold the light steady. Their silence gives space for thought, for others to speak, for better ideas to surface. They don't rush to respond. They let the moment breathe. In that pause lies wisdom. The danger of underestimating quiet people is that it blinds us to potential. We measure energy in decibels instead of depth. A teacher might miss the brilliance of a reserved student. A company might overlook the quiet employee who's been observing problems and silently designing better solutions. A friend might misjudge someone's calm as disinterest when it's actually understanding. The result is a world that often rewards performance over perception. Quiet people carry a kind of power that reveals itself slowly. It's the power of patience, focus, and observation. They don't get distracted by the noise around them. They know that reacting to everything drains energy. They choose their battles carefully, their words precisely. That's why when they act, it matters. When they decide to move, it's not impulsive, it's intentional. They've already played the possibilities out in their mind. Many quiet people have learned to hide in plain sight. They've seen what happens when they speak up and get drowned out, so they retreat into their own rhythm. But beneath that calm exterior, their minds are alive. They're studying people, learning patterns, understanding motives. They can read a room better than most because they've practiced silence as a skill. They know that observation brings truth faster than argument. To underestimate them is to misunderstand how power works. Power isn't always the loudest voice in the room. Sometimes it's the one that waits until everyone else is done talking, then says one sentence that changes the direction of everything. The quiet person may not dominate a discussion, but their insight can redefine it. When they finally act, others realize how much they'd been missing. Quiet people don't need to prove themselves through constant noise. They let results speak. Their consistency, thoughtfulness, and calm under pressure earn respect over time. They're often the ones people turn to when chaos hits, because they think clearly when others panic. Their stillness becomes stability. Their silence becomes strength. In a world obsessed with visibility, it's easy to forget that value isn't measured in volume. The quiet ones are the unseen backbone of teams, families, and communities. They're the steady presence that keeps things balanced, the listener who remembers what others forget, the thinker who solves problems others didn't notice. They may not announce their impact, but it's there, woven into the success of everyone around them. Never underestimate quiet people, because quietness isn't the absence of power, it's its refinement. Noise may draw attention, but silence draws understanding. Those who seem passive often hold the deepest resolve. They don't show their cards early, they don't need to dominate the room, and they don't chase recognition. They simply do what they do best: observe, learn, and act when the time is right. True strength doesn't need an audience. Real power isn't loud, and it doesn't ask to be seen. It exists quietly, in the way someone endures what others can't, in the way they keep moving forward when nobody's watching. The world often confuses noise for strength, mistaking aggression for confidence, attention for influence. But true strength lives in moments that go unnoticed, the moments of restraint, patience, and composure that happen away from the spotlight. A strong person doesn't announce they're strong. They don't need to. You can feel it in their calm. They don't flinch when things fall apart. They don't react to every provocation or need to prove every point. They carry themselves with an unspoken steadiness, the kind that comes from surviving things no one knows about. They've faced storms in silence and learned that real courage isn't in the shouting. It's in staying grounded when everything around you shakes. The people who seem the quietest often carry the heaviest burdens. They've already fought their battles, sometimes alone, sometimes unseen, and discovered that validation doesn't heal wounds. They've learned to find strength in discipline, not display. That's why they move differently. They don't chase arguments or seek revenge. They're too busy building peace inside themselves. Their strength is internal, forged through the slow, hard work of resilience. True strength doesn't show off, it shows up. It's in the parent who wakes up early every day to keep their family stable, no matter how tired they are. It's in the person who forgives even when they have every reason not to. It's in the worker who's been overlooked again and again, but still gives their best. These people don't post about it, don't demand applause, and don't seek credit. They understand that what matters most can't be measured in recognition. The loud kind of strength often burns fast and fades. It needs attention to stay alive. It depends on reactions and applause to validate itself. But quiet strength endures because it's rooted in purpose, not performance. It doesn't break when ignored because it was never built for attention in the first place. It was built for survival. It was built for truth. It's the kind of strength that doesn't crumble when no one is watching because it's been tested in isolation. You can see true strength in how someone handles power. The strong don't use power to dominate. They use it to protect. They don't humiliate others to feel important. They don't speak louder to win an argument. They understand control isn't about making others small. It's about staying centered when you could easily lose yourself. Real strength is quiet humility, the ability to be capable but not cruel, powerful but not prideful. When you meet someone truly strong, you notice something subtle. They don't compete for attention. They listen more than they talk. They stay composed in conflict, not because they don't care, but because they choose peace over ego. They know that losing control is easy, but mastering your reaction takes more power than shouting ever will. Their calm unsettles those who mistake silence for surrender, but in truth, that silence is strategy. It's self-control. It's knowing you don't have to win every battle to prove your worth. Society often glorifies the visible, the loud victories, the dramatic comebacks, the grand displays of strength. But behind every public triumph is private endurance. Behind every confident leader is a history of quiet struggle. Behind every calm voice is a person who has learned to silence their own chaos. True strength is born in solitude, when there's no one around to cheer you on. It's in the decision to keep standing after failure, to stay kind after betrayal, to keep faith after loss. The strongest people rarely talk about what made them strong. They've learned that pain doesn't need to be broadcast to be valid. They carry their lessons quietly, using them not to boast but to build. They walk through life with quiet assurance, knowing their value doesn't depend on how many people notice it. They don't need to convince anyone of who they are because they already know. That's the paradox of real strength. It's invisible until it's needed. It doesn't demand attention, but when it's tested, it shows up unmistakably. It's in the steady hands that keep working during chaos, in the voice that stays calm when others panic, in the person who chooses integrity over popularity. True strength is consistent, not conditional. It doesn't rise for the crowd, it rises for the challenge. The loudest person in the room isn't always the strongest. Sometimes, the real strength sits quietly, unnoticed, until the moment comes when it has to reveal itself. And when it does, there's no question about it. You can see it in the eyes, hear it in the tone, feel it in the presence. It doesn't need to prove itself because it already has, over and over, in silence. When nobody else was paying attention, respect comes after understanding, not before. Too often, People demand respect without earning it, or they hand it out based on appearances, titles, or assumptions. Real respect isn't automatic. It's not something you can buy, force, or fake. It grows naturally when you take the time to truly see someone, to understand where they've been, what they've carried, and what they stand for. Without understanding, what people call respect is just politeness wearing a mask. We live in a world that judges fast. We look at someone's clothes, job, or background and decide what kind of person they must be. We categorize them before they even open their mouth. But respect that comes from surface-level perception doesn't last, because it's built on illusion. Real respect takes curiosity. It takes listening. It takes effort to see past what's visible and recognize what's real. When you understand a person's struggle, their resilience, or the quiet battles they fight, respect becomes natural. It's no longer something you choose. It's something you feel. Understanding someone means stepping outside yourself. It means pausing your own opinions long enough to consider someone else's reality. Most people don't do that. They think respect means agreeing, when it really means recognizing. You don't have to share someone's beliefs to understand their perspective. You don't have to approve of their choices to acknowledge the reasons behind them. That's where real respect begins, in awareness, not alignment. Think about how quickly people form opinions about others based on fragments of information. A mistake becomes a label. A rumor becomes a truth. A single encounter defines someone forever. But if you stopped and asked what led up to that moment, if you learned what that person had been through, the story would look different. Understanding softens judgment. It doesn't excuse actions, but it explains them. And when you understand, respect follows, not for what someone did, but for what they endured, for how they survived, for what they're still trying to become. Respect built on understanding is deeper because it recognizes humanity. It sees that every person, no matter how flawed, carries complexity. The coworker who seems distant might be carrying pressure you can't see. The friend who withdrew might be fighting an invisible battle. The person who acts cold might have learned long ago that warmth invites pain. Once you start understanding these layers, respect shifts from obligation to empathy. You stop asking, "Why are they like that?" and start realizing, that's how they've had to be. There's a reason shallow respect fades so fast. When it's based on titles, money, or popularity, it disappears the moment those things do. But when respect is based on understanding, it endures. You can disagree with someone yet still honor their honesty. You can see someone's faults and still admire their strength. You can lose faith in their choices, but not in their humanity. That's what separates true respect from temporary admiration. Understanding also changes how we handle conflict. When you don't understand someone, it's easy to dismiss them, to attack their behavior, to walk away thinking you're right. But when you make the effort to understand, you listen differently. You realize that everyone's reactions come from somewhere. Their history, their pain, their fears. That doesn't make bad behavior acceptable, but it does make it human. And when you see the humanity behind the action, respect becomes a bridge instead of a wall. The strongest relationships, whether personal or professional, are built on respect that grows through understanding. It's why some people can disagree fiercely but still trust each other. They've taken the time to see the person, not just the opinion. They understand that disagreement doesn't cancel respect, ignorance does. When both sides listen before judging, something powerful happens. Communication replaces conflict, and connection replaces ego. In leadership, this truth is even more visible. A leader who demands respect through authority gets obedience, not loyalty. But a leader who earns respect through understanding, who listens to their team, values their experiences, and acknowledges their struggles, builds something stronger. People follow willingly when they feel seen. Respect earned through empathy creates commitment, while respect demanded through fear creates silence. Respect and understanding are inseparable. You can't truly respect what you don't understand, because without understanding, you're not respecting the person, you're respecting an image of them that you've invented. It's easy to respect people when they fit your expectations. It's harder and more meaningful to respect them when they don't. That's where growth begins. When you slow down enough to understand, you start seeing the world differently. You start recognizing that everyone carries stories that shape their choices. You stop reacting to behavior alone and start noticing what drives it. You learn that respect isn't about hierarchy, age, or reputation. It's about awareness. The more you understand, the less you judge. The less you judge, the more space you create for respect to exist. Respect that comes from understanding has weight. It lasts through disagreement, through distance, through change. It isn't blind admiration, it's clear-eyed appreciation. It's knowing someone's flaws and still valuing their essence. It's recognizing effort even when the outcome fails. It's seeing the whole person, not just the moment in front of you. Judgment is easy. Knowing the truth takes patience. Most people stop at the surface, drawing conclusions from what they see or hear without digging deeper. It's faster to judge than to understand, easier to point than to pause. We see someone act a certain way, make a mistake, or fall short, and we think we know their story. But judgment is a snapshot, while truth is a full film. You can't know the truth about someone's life by glancing at a single frame. The human mind loves shortcuts. It looks for patterns, fills in blanks, and makes assumptions to save time. That's why judgment feels so natural. It gives us the illusion of knowing without the effort of understanding. But what we call certainty is often just convenience. It's the mind saying, "I've seen enough," when it hasn't even begun to see clearly. Truth doesn't come quickly. It reveals itself slowly, piece by piece, and only to those willing to wait for it. The danger of quick judgment is how convincing it feels. Once we decide something about a person, we start looking for evidence to prove ourselves right. We stop being curious and start defending our opinion. Every action they take becomes a confirmation of what we already believe. It's called confirmation bias, and it blinds us. We stop seeing people as they are and start seeing them as we've decided they must be. That's how truth gets buried under layers of assumption. Patience is the key to uncovering what's real. To know the truth, you have to listen longer, look closer, and care enough to ask questions. You have to resist the instinct to finish someone's story before they've had a chance to tell it. The truth might surprise you. The person you thought was cold might just be cautious. The one you labeled lazy might be carrying exhaustion you can't see. The one you assumed had it easy might be fighting battles they've never voiced. Every person carries a story that doesn't fit neatly into your first impression. Judgment demands certainty, but truth demands time. And time tests your willingness to understand. It means sitting with discomfort, admitting you might be wrong, allowing the possibility that your assumptions don't hold up. Most people aren't patient enough for that. They prefer conclusions that come fast, even if they're false, because certainty feels safe. But real understanding requires humility. It requires you to say, "Maybe I don't know the whole story yet." In every relationship, this difference matters. Quick judgment destroys trust. Patience builds it. When you judge someone too soon, you close the door to connection. You stop giving them the chance to show you who they are beyond your assumptions. But when you choose patience, you create space for truth to emerge naturally. People open up when they feel seen instead of labeled. They reveal their real selves when they sense they're not being watched for mistakes. Patience invites honesty. Judgment shuts it down. Judging others also says more about us than it does about them. When we rush to conclusions, it often reflects our own fears or insecurities. We judge what we don't understand because understanding requires vulnerability. To truly know someone, you have to let go of control. You have to step into their perspective, even if it challenges your own. That takes emotional effort, and judgment offers an easier escape. It allows us to feel right without doing the work of empathy. Truth has layers, and it rarely fits simple explanations. Life isn't black and white. It's 100 shades of context. The mistake you see might be part of a lesson someone's still learning. The decision you criticize might be the best they could make with what they had. When you give time for truth to unfold, you start realizing how much complexity lies beneath the surface. The world stops looking like a place full of villains and heroes and starts looking like a place full of people trying to figure it out. Patience doesn't mean ignoring wrong behavior or excusing harm. It means seeking understanding before passing judgment. It means asking why before deciding how you feel. It's about slowing down enough to see the full picture, not just the moment that caught your attention. The truth always has more depth than what gossip or appearances reveal. You find it in details, in consistency, in what people do when no one is watching. The most patient people often seem quiet because they're not busy judging, they're observing. They take in information, they notice contradictions, and they wait until the truth shows itself. They know that people eventually reveal who they are through time, not through first impressions. Their patience isn't passivity, it's wisdom. They understand that hasty conclusions can cost you relationships, opportunities, and peace. Knowing the truth requires more than eyes. It requires intention. You have to want to understand, not just to know. You have to give up the comfort of quick answers and accept that some truths take time to earn. The easy path is to judge, label, and move on. The harder path is to stay curious, to look deeper, and to give people the grace of time. That's where the difference between being right and being real begins. Every person carries a story you can't see. On the outside, people often look composed, functional, and ordinary, but underneath that surface there's always a history, a mix of moments, memories, and quiet struggles that shaped who they are. You pass people on the street, sit beside them in class, work with them every day, and never realize what they've endured. Pain doesn't always show on faces, and strength doesn't always look strong. Everyone carries invisible weight, even the ones who smile the most. It's easy to assume you know someone just because you see their habits or hear their words, but most of life happens behind closed doors, in silence, in thoughts that never make it out loud. There's the person who's always cheerful but hides anxiety that keeps them awake at night. There's the coworker who seems distant because they're carrying grief they can't explain. There's the neighbor who's overly kind because they're still trying to make up for a past they regret. People wear masks not to deceive, but to survive. They protect themselves from judgment, from pity, from misunderstanding. Every person's story begins long before you meet them. It's written in the things they've lost, the people they've loved, the places they've left behind. Sometimes their reactions make no sense until you learn what shaped them. The friend who avoids conflict might have grown up in a house full of shouting. The person who struggles to trust might have been betrayed by someone they once relied on completely. The one who stays quiet in groups might have spent years being ignored. When you realize this, you stop taking behavior at face value. You start seeing people as layered, not simple. The truth is, no one walks through life untouched. Everyone has scars, some visible, some buried deep. Some are healing, some still bleed quietly. You can't tell by looking who's fighting the hardest battle. That's why compassion matters more than judgment. When you remember that everyone carries a story, you start treating people with a little more patience. You stop assuming malice where there might be pain. You learn to pause before reacting, to listen before labeling, to ask before assuming. Life has a way of teaching people lessons they didn't ask for. Some carry guilt they can't release. Others carry memories they can't forget. Some have been shaped by loss so deep it changed how they see the world. And yet, they keep moving, smiling, working, living. That quiet endurance is one of the most powerful human traits, continuing despite the unseen weight. It's not always about overcoming. Sometimes it's just about surviving. The fact that people show up at all, even when they're breaking inside, is a kind of strength that deserves respect. We often measure people by what they show us, their achievements, their words, their moods, but those are only the outer layers. The real story sits underneath, in what they've had to do to get there. Someone's success might come from years of failure. Someone's confidence might come from fighting through fear. Someone's kindness might come from knowing how much cruelty hurts. You can't know these things unless you care enough to look deeper. Everyone's actions are rooted in something, and those roots run deeper than appearances. Understanding that every person carries a story changes the way you see the world. You start noticing the details, the pause before someone speaks, the way their eyes drift when certain topics come up, the tone they use to hide emotion. You start realizing that silence isn't always indifference, that anger isn't always hostility, that distance isn't always rejection. Most of the time, it's protection. People build walls not because they don't care, but because they've learned what happens when they leave themselves open. If you knew what someone was carrying, you'd treat them differently. You'd forgive faster, speak softer, listen longer. You'd realize that what feels like rudeness might be exhaustion. What feels like coldness might be fear. You'd stop expecting everyone to act like they're okay, because okay is rarely the full story. Everyone's fighting something you can't see, a worry about the future, a scar from the past, or a shadow they've learned to live with. It doesn't make them weak, it makes them human. Empathy begins with this understanding. It's the ability to see beyond the visible and recognize that there's always more to the picture. When you stop assuming you know everything about someone, you start connecting on a real level. You learn to appreciate the quiet forms of resilience that never get acknowledged, the small victories, the daily endurance, the effort to stay kind in a world that hasn't always been kind back. Every person you meet is carrying a collection of untold stories, and most of them never get the chance to be heard. Some are painful, some beautiful, all real. When you remember that, arrogance fades and humility takes its place. You stop comparing lives and start appreciating the unseen strength around you. Everyone's story matters, even if it's never spoken, even if no one else ever knows it. What you see is just the cover. The real story is written deep within, where the eyes can't reach, but the heart can understand. Silence can be louder than words. It speaks in moments when speech would only dilute the truth. Silence isn't emptiness. It's communication in its purest form. It carries emotion, meaning, and power in ways that language can't always reach. When someone chooses silence, it doesn't mean they have nothing to say. It often means they've said enough, or that words could never hold what they truly feel. The quiet between people, between thoughts, between heartbeats, can reveal more than 1,000 explanations ever could. We live in a world that fears silence. People rush to fill it, to cover the spaces between conversations with noise and distraction. The pause makes them uncomfortable, as if stillness exposes something they don't want to face. But silence isn't a void, it's a mirror. It reflects truth back at you, whether you're ready to see it or not. In silence, thoughts grow louder, emotions surface, and honesty finds a way to breathe. It's why silence makes some people uneasy. It strips away the noise that protects them from what's real. Sometimes silence is respect. It's what happens when words would only cheapen the moment. When someone's in pain, sometimes the most powerful response isn't advice or sympathy, it's presence. A quiet moment shared with someone who's hurting can say, "I'm here," more clearly than any sentence could. Silence gives space for emotions to exist without being managed or explained. It honors the weight of what's happening instead of trying to fix it. That kind of silence carries grace. Other times, silence is strength. It's the decision not to argue when you could. It's choosing not to explain yourself to people who've already made up their minds. It's restraint, control, discipline. Words can be weapons, but silence can be armor. The person who can hold their tongue when provoked has more control than the one who reacts. Silence in conflict isn't weakness. It's a sign of someone who values peace over ego, truth over noise. They know that not every attack deserves a reply, and not every misunderstanding deserves correction. Silence also carries truth in ways that words sometimes can't. You can lie with language, but silence has no disguise. It reveals. The silence after a question can speak volumes about guilt, hesitation, or fear. The quiet after a goodbye can echo with what was never said. The absence of words in a relationship can show more about distance than any argument could. When people stop talking, it's not always because they have nothing left. It's because what remains is too heavy for speech. In silence, understanding deepens. When you listen without the urge to respond, you begin to hear what's beneath the words. You catch the tremor in someone's voice, the shift in their breathing, the pauses that hide pain or hesitation. Real listening isn't waiting for your turn to talk. It's allowing silence to guide you toward what someone is really saying. The space between words often carries the truth that language can't hold. Silence gives that truth room to exist. There's also a kind of silence that lives inside people, the inner quiet that comes after chaos, the stillness that follows pain. It's not emptiness, but peace, the kind earned through surviving noise. When someone has gone through enough, they stop explaining, stop defending, stop trying to be understood. They find comfort in silence because it no longer feels lonely, it feels honest. That kind of silence doesn't need to prove anything. It's the quiet of someone who has faced storms and realized they don't need to shout to show they've survived. Silence teaches patience. It slows things down, forces reflection. In silence, you begin to notice the world differently. The rustle of leaves, the rhythm of your own breathing, the thoughts that usually get buried under distraction. It reminds you that meaning doesn't always need words, that sometimes being still is more powerful than taking action. People who are comfortable in silence often carry a deeper kind of confidence. They don't rush to fill the space. They let the moment unfold naturally. In relationships, silence can heal or destroy. It can be the pause that allows both sides to cool down, or the wall that grows when communication dies. It depends on intention. Chosen silence can be peace. Forced silence can be pain. When silence is mutual, it brings understanding. When it's one-sided, it can suffocate. Learning to read the difference is one of the hardest parts of human connection. Silence has many voices. It can comfort, accuse, forgive, or mourn. It can stand for dignity when words would only cause harm. It can express love more deeply than a declaration. It can reveal distance that's been growing unnoticed. It can mean surrender, or it can mean power. The key is knowing which kind of silence you're hearing. The world may tell you to speak up, to make noise, to be heard. But sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is none at all. When words lose their meaning, silence becomes truth. When noise fades, silence remains, steady and unshakable, carrying everything words could never hold.